Welcome back to our channel World of Royals, where we share updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her royal family. Today, we bring you some news.
We are accustomed to seeing the Duke and Duchess of Sussex locked in constant conflict. We are accustomed to watching them rail against the press, the palace, and anyone they believe stands in their way. But today, something has shifted, and the tremors are felt. This time, the headlines coming out of Los Angeles suggest they may have provoked an adversary that does not bend or quietly move on. This is not a tabloid editor in London or a distant relative who prefers silence. This is one of the most powerful luxury houses on earth. This is Chanel. And while the royal family absorbs controversy to preserve tradition, Chanel operates by a simpler rule: protect the brand at all costs. According to breaking legal filings, the French fashion giant has launched a lawsuit sending shockwaves through fashion and entertainment circles. This is not a warning letter or a private dispute. This is an $8 million legal claim alleging fraud, deception, and breach of trust. At the center of the accusation is a practice insiders call wardrobing. But this is not an influencer returning a dress after a photo shoot. The lawsuit describes a calculated strategy allegedly designed to sustain a luxury image as finances tightened. Chanel claims its boutiques were treated like an unpaid costume department. High-end pieces purchased, worn publicly, and returned. And the most damaging claim is this: Chanel says they documented everything. If true, the fallout may extend beyond fashion, and Prince Harry could be drawn into the consequences. Let's break down what Chanel says happened next. When you engage with a heritage luxury house like Chanel, there's an unspoken agreement that governs every transaction. This is not a casual purchase or a temporary exchange. Couture operates on trust, discretion, and permanence. According to the lawsuit now unfolding, Chanel claims that this fundamental understanding was repeatedly violated over an extended period of time. What the brand alleges is not a misunderstanding or a single dispute return, but a deliberate pattern that unfolded quietly while evidence was being collected. At the center of the claim is a number that appears again and again in the filings: 47. Not a handful of garments, not an isolated mistake, but 47 separate items allegedly purchased, worn, and returned. Chanel's legal position suggests that patience played a key role in how this situation escalated. Rather than intervening early, the brand allegedly allowed the behavior to continue. There was no confrontation after the 5th return or the 10th. According to sources familiar with the case, Chanel monitored the activity, documenting dates, locations, and item details, allowing what they described as a pattern to fully reveal itself. From their perspective, stopping the process too early would have allowed the conduct to be explained away as confusion. Letting it continue, they argue, removed any ambiguity about intent. The practice at the heart of the dispute is known within retail circles as wardrobing. It refers to purchasing items with the intention of using them briefly and then returning them. Chanel argues that this behavior takes on a very different meaning when applied to high-value couture worn at public events. The brand claims that these garments were allegedly used during appearances designed to attract media attention, placing Chanel's name, logo, and aesthetic in front of global audiences. According to the complaint, the items were not treated as personal purchases, but as temporary tools used to project a specific image. The lawsuit outlines what it describes as a consistent operational process. Items were allegedly purchased from flagship boutiques, prepared for events, and worn for short periods of time. Chanel claims that security elements and tags were removed prior to use and later reattached with precision. The garments were then returned quickly, often the next morning. Each return was reportedly accompanied by similar explanations. The items were unworn. The fit was incorrect. A defect had been discovered. Chanel disputes these claims, stating that the frequency and uniformity of the returns raise internal alarms. What distinguishes this case from routine retail disputes is Chanel's assertion that the brand's commercial value itself was exploited. According to filings, the public appearances created measurable benefit for other ventures, reinforcing a luxury image that extended beyond fashion. Chanel argues that its intellectual property was used without compensation to enhance personal branding, media projects, and commercial partnerships. In that framing, the alleged conduct caused damage not only through product handling, but through unauthorized brand leverage. The complaint emphasizes that couture is not designed to function as a rental service. Each piece represents craftsmanship, exclusivity, and long-term ownership. Chanel claims that allowing this behavior to continue unchecked would undermine the integrity of its retail system and set a precedent that could be replicated by others. By the time the 47th item was returned, the brand alleges the situation had crossed a line that could no longer be addressed quietly. From Chanel's perspective, the decision to pursue legal action was not driven by a single garment or a single interaction. It was driven by what they describe as a sustained pattern of conduct that threatened the foundation of how luxury fashion operates. This first phase of the case lays the groundwork for what follows, establishing the alleged scheme before the evidence itself takes center stage. According to Chanel, this context is essential for understanding why the dispute escalated so dramatically. As the lawsuit moves beyond alleged patterns of behavior, Chanel's case shifts toward what it describes as tangible proof. According to the filings, this is where the dispute transforms from narrative into technical examination of evidence. Chanel argues that luxury fashion is not merely aesthetic, but scientific. When high-value garments are returned, they are not casually rehung. They are inspected, analyzed, and evaluated for integrity. The brand claims this process revealed discrepancies too significant to ignore. The complaint references multiple items returned in what was described as pristine condition. Chanel disputes this characterization. According to internal reports cited in the filing, microscopic inspection allegedly revealed traces consistent with wear. Fabric stress points, residue, and scent markers were identified in areas unaffected by simple handling. Chanel maintains these findings were documented observations recorded by trained specialists. One example highlighted involves a blouse returned with tags intact and no visible signs of use. Chanel claims closer inspection revealed cosmetic residue embedded in the fibers near the collar. The brand argues this residue could not have transferred through packaging or transport alone. In addition to makeup traces, Chanel alleges scent compounds were detected that match fragrances publicly associated with the wearer. These findings, the brand claims, contradicted assertions that the garment had never been worn. Beyond physical analysis, Chanel's legal team points to behavioral evidence collected within boutiques. Surveillance footage, according to the complaint, documents repeated purchase and return cycles following a consistent timeline. Items were bought shortly before public appearances and returned immediately afterward. Chanel argues this timing pattern is critical. It suggests coordination rather than coincidence. Combined with physical findings, the brand claims the footage reinforces intentional use. The most serious escalation described involves audio documentation. Chanel alleges that during a disputed return involving an expensive gown, an interaction occurred that was recorded by store management. According to the transcript submitted, the conversation reflects heightened emotion and escalating pressure. Chanel claims the recording captures demands that the return be processed despite visible damage. According to Chanel's interpretation, the language used demonstrates awareness that the return violated policy. The complaint alleges influence and status were invoked to override procedures. Legal analysts note that if authenticated, such a recording could carry significant weight, moving beyond circumstantial evidence into direct documentation of intent. Chanel argues this interaction marked a definitive shift. The dispute moved beyond wear and tear into alleged coercion. The filing claims threats of reputational harm were introduced if staff refused to comply. Chanel frames this moment as evidence that the conduct was deliberate and aggressive. Adding another layer, the lawsuit references raw footage obtained from documentary production. Chanel's legal team asserts unaired material includes conversations aligning with their claims. Sources familiar with the footage say discussions about concealing tags and ensuring returns were captured on audio. Chanel argues these conversations demonstrate premeditation. From a legal standpoint, premeditation is pivotal. Chanel emphasizes mistakes occur, but planning cannot be dismissed as error. By presenting physical evidence, surveillance patterns, audio recordings, and media footage together, Chanel claims it constructed a comprehensive evidentiary framework. This framework, the brand argues, establishes not only that garments were worn, but that they were worn with the intention of returning them. This evidentiary stage, according to Chanel, explains why the dispute escalated beyond a private disagreement and entered the public legal arena, drawing widespread attention and scrutiny. Chanel maintains that this escalation was unavoidable once the evidence reached a critical mass. From their perspective, silence would signal acceptance. By filing publicly, the brand says it is defending not only itself, but the standards of luxury retail as a whole, setting boundaries that apply regardless of title, influence, or public profile. They argue that the case represents a line drawn, meant to discourage repetition and reinforce accountability across the fashion industry, going forward for all high-profile clients worldwide. As the legal dispute unfolds, the consequences described in the filings extend well beyond the walls of any boutique. Chanel's case, according to analysts, deliberately widens its scope in this final phase to address financial, professional, and industry-level implications. One of the most consequential elements involves how the purchases were allegedly paid for and categorized. The lawsuit notes that some transactions were reportedly processed through business entities rather than personal accounts. This distinction matters because it introduces questions that reach beyond fashion and into financial reporting. According to the complaint, certain purchases were allegedly logged as business expenses connected to media or production activities. Chanel argues that if items categorized this way were later returned for full refunds, accounting records should have been updated accordingly. The brand's legal theory suggests that failure to reconcile those records could create exposure far outside a civil fashion dispute. Legal experts note that once such details are placed into a public court filing, they can attract scrutiny from regulatory authorities independent of the original lawsuit. This financial dimension is where Prince Harry becomes more directly implicated. The filings reference accounts and cards connected to him, not as an accusation of intent, but as part of tracing transactional responsibility. Chanel's position appears to be that understanding who authorized payments and how they were documented is essential to establishing the full scope of the alleged conduct. Even indirect involvement can carry consequences once financial systems are examined in detail. The ripple effects described do not stop with finances. According to industry sources cited in reporting around the case, the fashion world reacts quickly to controversy. Designers, editors, and event organizers rely heavily on brand partnerships. Association with unresolved allegations can be risky, regardless of legal outcomes. As a result, access invitations are often reconsidered quietly. The absence of a public announcement does not mean the absence of consequence. One of the most widely discussed implications involves alleged shifts in elite fashion event access. Gatekeepers depend on the trust of major fashion houses to fund publications and productions. Chanel's lawsuit places decision-makers in a difficult position. Supporting an individual accused of defrauding advertisers risks alienating those advertisers themselves. In this environment, neutrality often looks like distance. The filings also suggest cooperation from individuals once considered allies. Chanel claims to have identified witnesses willing to provide sworn testimony that contradicts benign explanations. In high-profile circles, reputations are currencies. When a legal dispute threatens contracts or endorsements, self-preservation tends to prevail. If such testimony materializes, it can significantly weaken narratives that rely on misunderstanding or rogue assistance. Beyond individual fallout, the lawsuit is already influencing policy discussions within luxury retail. According to sources, fashion houses are reviewing lending practices and tightening return policies for high-profile clients. Informal trust-based arrangements may give way to deposits, contracts, and stricter oversight. If so, the consequences will be felt across the industry, affecting stylists, celebrities, and brands alike. Chanel's pursuit of substantial damages is framed as symbolic as much as financial. The brand argues that the amount reflects deterrence, not just loss. From their perspective, allowing alleged misuse to pass without consequence would invite repetition. By drawing a hard line, Chanel positions itself as defending the integrity of luxury commerce. As this case moves forward, its resolution will determine more than liability. It will signal whether fame alters accountability or whether rules apply uniformly. Chanel's message, as articulated through its filings, is clear. Prestige does not grant exemption. Couture is not a costume, and trust is not unlimited. Whatever the outcome, The dispute has already reshaped conversations about privilege, responsibility, and boundaries at the highest levels of celebrity culture. But that is not where the story ends. As this lawsuit continues to unfold, sources suggest another insider has stepped forward with information that could complicate matters even further. Details about what allegedly happened behind closed doors have not yet been made public, but they may soon change the entire narrative. That is a story we will cover when the time comes. If you want to stay ahead of developments the mainstream media hesitates to explore, make sure you subscribe and stay with us.